Do I? The night my uncle slid a legal document across the dinner table and told me to sign it for the good of the family, I remember noticing how steady his hands were. No trembling, no hesitation. Like he'd done this before. Maybe he had. I'm the kind of person who keeps her head down and works. Always have been. I graduated from Penn State on a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs while my cousin Felicity was backpacking through Portugal on my uncle's credit card. I built my career in corporate auditing the slow and glamorous way, spreadsheets at midnight, client calls at 6 in the morning, learning to read financial statements the way other people read novels. By the time I was 32, I had a solid reputation, a modest savings account, and a clear plan. Buy into a small forensic accounting firm in Pittsburgh that my mentor was looking to sell. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Then my grandmother died. Her name was Ruth. She was 79, sharp until the very end, and she loved me in that quiet, practical way that didn't need to be announced. She used to say that the loudest people in any room were usually the ones with the least to offer. She was talking about her own son when she said that. My Uncle Gregory, Grandma Ruth left me $240,000 in a trust. It wasn't a surprise. She had told me about it 3 years before she passed, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and the directness of a woman who had no patience for dancing around hard things. "It's your exit money," she said. "Don't let Gregory touch it." I should have tattooed that warning on the inside of my wrist. The dinner where everything unraveled was in late October, 6 weeks after the funeral. My uncle had invited me to his house in Shadyside, the kind of house with a wine cellar and a chef's kitchen that he definitely couldn't afford on his construction company's actual revenue, but that's a detail I didn't fully understand yet. His wife, my Aunt Lorraine, served lamb chops and kept refilling my glass in a way that felt, in retrospect, strategic. My cousin Felicity sat at the end of the table, barely eating, scrolling through her phone with the detached energy of someone waiting for a performance to begin. The document arrived with the dessert. "We need you to co-sign this," my uncle said, sliding it toward me like it was a birthday card. "It's just a procedural thing for the trust restructuring, keeps the assets protected from estate taxes." I picked it up. I'm an auditor. Reading documents is what I do. It wasn't a tax filing. It was a transfer authorization. My $240,000 redirected into a holding company called Holloway Creative Partners, LLC. I flipped to the second page. Felicity's name was listed as the sole managing member. I set the document down very carefully because I didn't trust what my hands might do if I wasn't deliberate about it. "This transfers my inheritance to Felicity's company," I said. My uncle didn't blink. Felicity has a real opportunity here. Her wellness brand has serious momentum. She needs seed capital to secure the manufacturing contracts, and you have a career, a salary, you're stable. You don't need a lump sum to get ahead. Felicity does. My aunt smiled at her lamb chop. Felicity finally looked up from her phone. "It's not charity, it's an investment. Once Holloway scales, you'll be compensated. It'll be worth more than the original amount." I looked at the 3 of them, the careful staging of it, the lamb chops, the topped-off wine glass, the document already tabbed with a little sticky note arrow pointing to the signature line, and I understood that this had been planned well in advance of tonight. "I'm not signing this," I said. My uncle's expression shifted, not to anger exactly, to something colder. "The trust has a management clause. I'm the designated trustee. I have the legal authority to direct the funds with or without your signature. We're asking you as a courtesy." "Then why do you need my signature?" He didn't answer that. I stood up, pulled on my coat, and said the only thing that felt true. "I'll have a lawyer look at this by Friday." My uncle called after me as I reached the front door. His voice had dropped an octave, the way men's voices do when they want you to understand that pleasantries are over. "You should think carefully before you make this adversarial. I sit on the advisory board for the Mercer Group. I know they're your firm's biggest client. One conversation and that relationship ends, and your mentor's sale? I can make that complicated too. Go home, sleep on it, and remember who you are in this family." I walked out into the cold Pittsburgh night and stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, breathing. Not because I was scared, because I needed to think clearly, and rage is not a thinking tool. I was about to learn that I had drastically underestimated what my uncle was willing to do. By Wednesday morning, I understood. I arrived at my office to find a note on my desk asking me to come to the HR director's office before 9. Inside, my supervisor was there too, sitting with the careful stillness of someone who had rehearsed this. He slid a printed email chain across the desk. The emails were from my address. They were addressed to two of our firm's senior partners, and they were unhinged: accusations about billing fraud, threats to report the firm to the PCAOB, personal insults about one partner's integrity that were specific enough to seem credible and insane enough to seem unstable. I had never written any of them. We received a call yesterday afternoon, the HR director said, from Gregory Holloway. He expressed concern about your mental state following your grandmother's passing. He mentioned erratic behavior, financial paranoia, a fixation on the family estate. I felt the room tilt slightly. He suggested we review your recent correspondence, she continued. Given your access to client financials, we have a duty of care. Those emails are fabricated, I said. My voice was steady. I don't know how. I did not write them. My uncle is retaliating because I refused to sign over my inheritance. My supervisor looked genuinely uncomfortable. We've placed a temporary hold on your access credentials while we investigate. Paid administrative leave, 2 weeks, possibly longer. I drove home in a kind of controlled numbness. By the time I reached my apartment, Felicity had posted an Instagram story. It was a video of her, soft lighting, no makeup in the calculated way that takes 40 minutes to achieve, speaking directly to her camera in a trembling voice about a family member who was struggling and making false accusations and threatening the well-being of people she claims to love. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. Her 300,000 followers filled my name in the comments themselves. The next 72 hours were a systematic demolition. My uncle used his banking connections to flag my accounts for a suspicious activity review, claiming, through a letter from his attorney, that I was under investigation for misappropriating funds from the family trust. My accounts weren't frozen exactly, but transfers were delayed, cards flagged, a $1,200 rent payment bounced for the first time in my adult life. My landlord texted me a terse message about concerning patterns. I called a lawyer. A real one, not the one my uncle had used for the trust. A woman named, it doesn't matter, I'll just call her my attorney, who specialized in estate litigation. She reviewed the trust documents and called me back with a measured voice that told me she was trying to be honest without being cruel. The management clause is aggressive but potentially enforceable, she said. Your uncle structured this well. It would take 6 to 12 months of litigation to contest it, and that's assuming we can prove intent to defraud, which requires discovery, which requires time and money I don't currently have. I finished. Yes. I sat on my kitchen floor after that call. Not dramatically. There was just nowhere else to go. I want to be honest about what that period felt like, because I think people who haven't experienced this kind of systematic erasure, the kind engineered by someone who knows exactly which levers to pull, sometimes imagine it must feel like a movie. It doesn't. It feels like static. It feels like trying to explain to someone that you're drowning while they hand you a pamphlet about swimming lessons. I had 2 weeks of paid leave, a lawyer I couldn't fully afford, a reputation being quietly dismantled by someone with 30 years more practice at this than me, and a cousin posting wellness content about gratitude while wearing a cashmere sweater my grandmother's money had bought. I also had 12 years of forensic auditing experience and, as it turned out, a lot of insomnia. I started with the public record. Holloway Creative Partners LLC had been registered 8 months ago, 4 months before my grandmother's death, which meant my uncle had been planning this while she was still alive. Turner Construction, his company, had filed 3 amended tax returns in the past 2 years. There were 2 civil judgments against it from unpaid subcontractors. The Shadyside house had a second mortgage taken out 18 months ago. Gregory Holloway was not a successful businessman who was generously investing in his daughter's future. He was a man drowning in debt who had decided his niece was a life raft. I kept digging. Holloway Creative Partners had a website for Felicity's wellness brand, supplements, a Clarity membership subscription, a line of silk sleep masks with affirmations printed on them. It looked legitimate at a glance. But the registered agent for the LLC was the same attorney who had drafted the trust management clause. The manufacturing invoices on the website linked to a shell fulfillment company in Nevada that had no physical address. The 5,000 members in the Clarity community had no traceable social proof, no tagged posts, no reviews, no community forum activity. Felicity's brand was generating revenue on paper that did not correspond to any real product movement I could verify. And then I found the one detail that made everything else make sense. Holloway Creative Partners LLC had a co-registered doing business's name filed with the Pennsylvania Secretary of State, listed under officers and responsible parties right below Felicity's name, mine. My full legal name, my home address, my professional license number. I hadn't been excluded from the scheme. I had been built into it as the floor. My uncle hadn't just taken my money. He had used my clean professional record, my CPA license, my identity to give his money laundering operation a credible face. The construction contracts that should have been paying union wages were being routed through Felicity's fake wellness memberships and reported as consulting revenue. If anyone ever audited Holloway Creative Partners, they would find my name on the documents and my credentials attached to the filings. I was the designated fall person, and I hadn't even known I was in the building. I need to tell you what I did next, because I know what I should have done, and I know what I actually did, and they were different things, and the difference almost cost me everything. What I should have done: call my attorney, share what I'd found, let the professionals handle it from a position of documented evidence. What I actually did: I called my uncle. In my defense, or maybe there is no defense, I had been awake for 22 hours, I had just discovered my identity had been weaponized, and the adrenaline convinced me that I had leverage and he would fold. I know what Holloway Creative Partners actually is, I said when he picked up. I know about the construction revenue routing. I know my name is on the filings. Give me my inheritance back, remove me from every document, and I walk away. I won't say a word. There was a silence that lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he laughed. Not the performance of a laugh. A real one. Quiet and certain and deeply unpleasant. Check the Secretary of State website, he said. The updated filing from this morning. I refreshed the page on my laptop with my free hand. A new document had been uploaded 2 hours earlier. It was a sworn statement notarized. It described how I, as a licensed CPA and officer of Holloway Creative Partners, had unilaterally redirected client funds to cover personal financial obligations. It was signed with my name. The signature looked exactly like mine. If you contact any regulatory body, my uncle said, you aren't a whistleblower, you're a licensed professional who committed fraud and is now trying to deflect blame onto her family. I have a paper trail, a notarized confession, and a therapist who is prepared to testify that you contacted her in crisis 6 weeks ago. You are the story here, not me. Do yourself a favor and disappear quietly. We have a launch event to prepare for. He ended the call. I sat in my apartment for a long time after that. The heat wasn't working properly, and I hadn't noticed until then. I could see my breath. I had handed him the exact weapon he needed to finish me, and I had done it voluntarily. In a phone call he had almost certainly recorded. I want to say I had a plan at that point. I didn't. I had nothing except the certain knowledge that I was out of conventional options and a forensic auditor's compulsive habit of documenting everything. My grandmother's estate effects arrived 11 days later. The executor had been slow, a kindly overwhelmed man who apologized twice in his cover letter for the delay. It was a medium-sized cardboard box, old photographs, a garnet brooch I remembered her wearing at Christmas, her personal address book, and a small digital camera in a zippered pouch with a handwritten note taped to it that said, "For Nora, personal use only." My name is Nora. I almost didn't turn it on. The battery indicator was showing 4%. I plugged it into a USB charger and waited. The memory card had 3 years of photographs. Birthday parties, garden pictures, a whole series of the cardinal that visited her backfeeder every morning. And near the end of the card, a folder labeled simply with a date, the date of her funeral. My grandmother had been meticulous about her privacy in her final years. After a housekeeper had stolen jewelry from her bedroom, she had purchased a small motion-activated camera and placed it inside the bookshelf in her home office. disguised behind a row of old encyclopedias. She had never told anyone about it. She had mentioned to me once obliquely that she had taken precautions about the office, and I had assumed she meant a lock on the door. The video file was 47 minutes long. It had been recorded on the morning of her funeral, while the rest of us were at the service. I know because I can see the light changing to the office window in the background, the thin, gray November light of a Pittsburgh morning. My uncle enters the office at the 11-minute mark. Aunt Lorraine is with him. They close the door. What follows is methodical and almost businesslike. My uncle opens my grandmother's desk drawer and removes a folder he clearly knew was there, which means he had been in that drawer before while she was alive. Inside the folder are documents. He spreads them on the desk. My aunt sits down, takes a pen, and begins practicing a signature. Not her own. Mine. My uncle stands behind her watching. More pressure on the downstroke of the N, he says. She writes it with a slight backward lean. My aunt adjusts. Tries again. He nods. They practice for 6 minutes. Then she signs 3 documents. Cleanly, with the ease of someone who has had enough rehearsal. My uncle gathers the papers, taps them into a neat stack, and says, once these are filed, she's locked in. The CPA license is the key. Even if she figures it out, she'll be too afraid to go public. He pauses, then adds something that I have replayed many times since. She's always wanted to be the good one. That's her weakness. She'll protect the family name even when the family doesn't deserve it. My aunt looks up at the bookshelf, directly at the camera, though she doesn't know it's there, and says, "You're probably right. She'll be upset for a while, but she'll fall in line." They leave the office. The camera continues recording the empty room for another 36 minutes. I watched the video 4 times, then I sat very still for a long time. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of greed that got out of hand. It was a construction, a deliberate step-by-step project planned while my grandmother was dying, executed on the day we buried her. My uncle had stood at the graveside and held my arm while I cried, and the whole time his attorney was already filing the first documents. I called my attorney. I told her I had a video. I described what was on it. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Don't touch anything on that camera. Don't transfer the file. Don't email it. Don't post it. Bring it to me tomorrow morning. Bring the original camera." I did. The 48 hours that followed were the most controlled I had felt in months, because I finally understood that I was not the one who should be afraid. My attorney had a contact at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, a connection from a case she had worked several years prior. She didn't call in a favor casually. She reviewed everything first: the LLC filings, the fabricated emails, the forged notarized statement, the construction company's amended returns, and the video. Then she made the call. Federal investigations don't move the way they do in movies. There's no dramatic 24-hour response, except this one came close because the construction contractor irregularities touched union pension funds, and that classification escalated things considerably. My uncle and aunt were hosting a launch event for Felicity's brand on a Friday evening, a gallery space in the Strip District, champagne, local press, the kind of Pittsburgh society crowd that my uncle had spent 30 years cultivating. It was meant to be the official debut of Holloway Creative Partners as a legitimate business. I was not invited. I went anyway. I had spent the previous 2 days doing the only other thing I needed to do, hiring an AV technician for the evening and paying him generously to adjust the presentation running on the gallery's main screen. I wore the one good blazer I owned. I walked through the front door with my head level and my hands steady, because I am my grandmother's granddaughter and she never once let anyone see her flinch. Felicity saw me first. Her face went through 3 expressions in 1 second: surprise, alarm, and then the performance of concern. "Nora, you shouldn't be here. Tonight isn't. You're not in a good place, and this isn't." "I'm fine, Felicity," I said. "Enjoy the party." My uncle appeared at my elbow within 30 seconds. His voice was low and deliberate. "Leave right now, or I call the police and have you removed." And that becomes the story. "The story is already written," I said. "I just wanted to see your face when it publishes." I walked to the presentation booth in the back corner of the gallery. The technician gave me a small nod. I picked up one of the wireless microphones from the presentation table and I turned it on. "Excuse me," I said. The room didn't stop immediately. Rooms never do. I said it again, louder. "I'd like to share something about the founding of Holloway Creative Partners. Since I'm listed as an officer, I thought I should introduce myself." The room quieted the way rooms do when something has gone wrong at a party. "I've never actually been to one of these events," I said. "So I thought we'd start with the origin story." I nodded to the technician. The presentation screen, which had been showing a loop of Felicity in a field of lavender, gauzy, and aspirational, flickered once. Then the video began to play. My grandmother's home office. The gray November light. My uncle's voice clear through the gallery speakers, coaching my aunt on the backward lean of my N. Her signature, practiced 6 times on camera before it was clean enough. His voice again. "She'll be too afraid to go public." That's her weakness. The gallery was silent in a way that felt physical, not the silence of inattention, the silence of 80 people holding their breath. My uncle moved toward the booth. 2 men I had not spoken to but had noticed near the entrance since I arrived stepped forward and intercepted him. Not police. Federal agents, in the particular plainclothes way that, once you know what you're looking for, is unmistakable. "That's a fabrication," my aunt said loudly, from somewhere to my left. Her voice had the specific pitch of a person who knows it isn't. "The metadata on the file is original and unmodified," I said into the microphone. "The camera it came from is currently in the custody of my attorney. The timestamp matches the morning of my grandmother's funeral. Her own motion-activated camera, in her own office. She bought it after someone she trusted stole from her." I paused. Turns out that was good instinct. My uncle was escorted through the gallery's side door. My aunt 2 minutes later, through the front, her silk blouse catching the light as she passed the champagne table, her hands behind her back. Felicity stood on the low platform where she had been about to give her brand speech. She was holding an index card with her talking points on it. She looked at me across the room with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not calculation, not performance, but something genuine and frightened. "What happens to me?" she said. Not dramatically. Quietly, like she actually wanted to know. I walked over and took the microphone away from her because she didn't need to be amplifying anything right now. "That depends on what you did knowingly," I said. "Talk to a lawyer tonight, an independent one, not your father's." That was the last thing I said to her for a long time. The next several months were paperwork and depositions, and the particular exhaustion of having your life rebuilt the slow, documented way. The forged notarized statement was formally vacated. The forged power of attorney filing was reversed. The LLC was dissolved. The IRS investigation into Turner Construction expanded to include 3 years of amended returns and eventually resulted in a referral to the Department of Justice. My uncle and aunt entered guilty pleas on wire fraud and conspiracy charges. The sentencing was 8 years. My uncle's attorney argued for leniency. The judge noted the premeditation, the use of a family member's professional credentials, and the theft from union pension accounts and was unmoved. My inheritance was restored from the seized assets of Turner Construction, with interest calculated from the date of the original transfer. My attorney also sent a formal letter to the Mercer Group, my firm's largest client, detailing the coercive threats made to compromise my professional standing. The Mercer Group's general counsel sent back a 2-paragraph response that included the phrase "deeply concerned" and later resulted in a formal complaint about my uncle's advisory board seat, which was, quietly, revoked. My former employer, conducted an internal review when the fabricated email chain was forensically analyzed and confirmed as originating outside my account. I received a written apology and an offer to return. I declined, politely and in writing. The wrongful termination matter was settled privately 8 weeks later. I'll say that it covered 6 months of lost salary and then some, and that my attorney earned every dollar of her contingency. Felicity cooperated with federal investigators. She maintains, and the evidence suggests it is largely true, that she believed the business structure was aggressive tax planning rather than money laundering, and that my involvement on the documents was something her father had characterized as a standard silent partner arrangement that I had agreed to. She was not charged. She sold her apartment in Shadyside and moved to a city where her last name means nothing, which is the most useful thing her father ever gave her, the chance to start somewhere without his shadow already there. I didn't forgive her. That word feels too large for what happened between us. Too clean. What I did was decide that the amount of my remaining life I was willing to spend in anger on her behalf was very small. She was used too, just with more comfort and in a different direction. That doesn't make us the same. It just means I don't have to carry her as an enemy. There's a small office in the Strip District now, 2 blocks from the gallery as it happens, which I find satisfying in a petty way I'm not going to pretend I don't enjoy. The sign on the door says, Callaway Forensic Consulting. I chose that name specifically, a deliberate distance from any name that belonged to anyone else. My grandmother's garnet brooch is on my desk. Not because I wear garnets, but because it was hers, and because the woman who sat at her kitchen table with black coffee and told me not to let Gregory touch my exit money deserved to be right about at least one thing. She was right about everything, actually. The loudest people in any room. I think about that dinner in Shadyside sometimes. The lamb chops. The way my aunt kept refilling my glass. The little sticky note arrow pointing to the signature line, like I was someone who needed to be guided to the place where I would sign away my own future. They had planned it so carefully, every contingency accounted for, every pressure point mapped, except the camera in the encyclopedias, except the granddaughter who was also an auditor, except the part where the floor they'd built their scheme on turned out to know how to read a financial statement better than anyone they'd hired. My grandmother used to say that dishonest people always underestimate the people they're stealing from. They have to, she said, otherwise they'd never be able to go through with it. I think she was right about that too. I've thought a lot about what actually stopped my uncle. Not the federal agents, not the attorney, not even the video technically. What stopped him was the same thing that built the trap he walked into, his certainty that he already knew exactly who I was. He had decided I was the stable one, the reliable one, the daughter, or in this case, niece, who would protect the family name even when the family didn't deserve it. He said that out loud, on camera, without knowing anyone would ever hear it. And he was so confident in that assessment that he never once considered I might be something else too. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the betrayal. Betrayal is just a word for when someone's hidden nature finally becomes visible. What I keep thinking about is how thoroughly he had categorized me, and how that categorization was the single biggest mistake he made. He looked at my career, my scholarship, my 12 years of quiet professional work, and he saw a person who could be used. He never looked long enough to see a person who had spent those 12 years learning exactly how fraud works from the inside. My grandmother understood something about this. She didn't warn me about Gregory because she thought I was fragile. She warned me because she respected what I was capable of, and she knew he would try to get there first. She was right, and she left me the tool to prove it, and she didn't even know that's what she was doing. That's the kind of preparation that only comes from a lifetime of watching people reveal themselves when they think no one is paying attention. I don't think people who do what my uncle did are monsters in any dramatic sense. I think they're people who got very good at a specific kind of math, calculating who has power and who doesn't, who will be believed and who won't, which risks are worth taking when the downside falls on someone else. Gregory had been running that math for decades. It had worked before. There was no particular reason in his estimation that it wouldn't work again. What he miscalculated was that the skills required to dismantle what he built were the exact skills he had convinced himself made me safe to exploit. An auditor who knows how to read financial filings, a person with enough discipline to sit in a library for 3 weeks on ramen and documentation instead of making noise too early, someone who, when she finally did make noise, made it in a room full of the people whose opinion mattered most to him. I'm not going to tell you that everything happens for a reason, because I don't believe that, and I think it's a cruel thing to say to someone in the middle of losing everything. What I will tell you is that the qualities that got me through this, patience, precision, the refusal to act before I had something real, were not qualities I picked up during the crisis. They were things I had spent my entire adult life building, quietly, in unglamorous circumstances, while my cousin was finding herself on 3 continents. The work you do before disaster arrives is the only thing that's actually yours when disaster gets there. My grandmother's brooch is still on my desk. I'm not sentimental about objects generally, but that one earns its space.